you. Well, good morning. We're ready to start. I'm Frank van Diggelen, ION president, and it's my duty and honor to introduce the people who've done all the hard work to bring us the conference, and then I will hand over to them, and they will take it away. So I have several things to read, and I'll mostly just read. Excuse me. So a lot of this is just logistics of how we're going to run things. Before I get started on things, I want to advise you that the session is being recorded with audio and video for broadcast to ION's virtual audience and will undoubtedly be hosted on ION's YouTube channel. This particular session will be broadcast later today. It's not going to be broadcast live, so you get to experience it in person, and you can watch it again later today. But please be mindful of the recordings because your in-room conversations may be picked up by the sensitive audio equipment, and so what you believe are private conversations may turn out not to be, so watch out for that. Similarly, to protect everyone's rights, I will remind you that your recording of this week's conference is not permitted, so please refer to the on-site program, that's this black and white thing, for ION's policy on photography and audio and video recording of sessions. During the sessions, we ask that you set your electronic devices to vibrate or put them in airplane mode or something like that, or both. ION is a membership organization, and becoming a member may be the single most valuable thing that you can do for your career in 2022. To make it easier for those new to ION to learn about us, we are running a membership special for those of you who are attending this meeting as a non-member. If you are wearing a, quote, yellow name badge, if you have one of those, you are eligible to join ION for an introductory price of $15, so almost nothing. Please see the registration desk for more information. I'm happy to announce that as of January of this year, our technical journal, Navigation, has gone open access. This is the end of a long road to achieve this, and it means that the research published in Navigation is available free of charge to a worldwide audience. We're spending a great deal of resources making Navigation the world's premier PNT journal and encourage you to check it out and share with your colleagues. The journal is indexed in many international services, but the easiest way for you to access it is through our website, ion.org/navi. That's N-A-V-I. ITM and PTTI are co-located meetings, and the advantage of this is that you are free to move between all the available sessions and tutorials, and download papers from either conference. We are grateful to those attending in person this year, all of you. I'm delighted to see so many three-dimensional people. It's a thrill for me to get out of my home office, and it's like, wow, people. So thank you for coming and being here. I hope it's as much of a thrill for you. As pleased as we are to have you, your health and safety are our priority, and we would like you to direct your attention to a short 2-minute presentation on health and safety protocols that the ION will be following this week. So we'll have a little video here. Greetings and welcome. We are glad you are here, and while we are ready to gather, learn, and share, your safety is our main concern. Please be mindful of the following rules of engagement so we can all have a fun, safe, and meaningful experience.
ION will be following the Center for Disease Control's guidance and regulations established by local authorities. Masks are currently required to be worn by all attendees, including vaccinated individuals, in indoor public places. Unvaccinated attendees should wear a mask at all times, including outdoors. Masks are acceptable for any attendee for any reason at any time. We ask that all participants use discretion in attending this week's events. If you are feeling ill, please exercise common sense and do not attend the conference that day, and get medical attention when necessary.
Throughout the week, there will be increased cleaning and disinfecting of surfaces. Now, a few notes for our presenters. You'll find disinfecting wipes on the speaker's podium. Also, ION will regularly disinfect podiums, computers, and microphones during scheduled breaks. If you're wearing a mask, please consider removing your mask while delivering your presentation to help others understand you more clearly.
Social distancing will not be required in session rooms or meal functions. However, ION has ensured that adequate seating is available to allow attendees to social distance according to their comfort level. For attendees who wish to eat outdoors, lunch seating is available on the pool deck. Simply get your lunch from the buffet and walk down to the pool exit on the first floor. Please make note of the hand sanitizing stations throughout the hotel and sanitize your hands frequently.
There will be reduced transfer of physical materials. The technical program and real-time schedule changes are available online at ion.org. Attendees are asked to please read email notices and read information contained in their on-site programs.
To protect our exhibitors, there will be no food or beverage permitted on the exhibit floor this year. However, our exhibitors are anxious to meet with you and show you what's been happening in PNT over these past many months. Please plan your schedule in such a way that ensures you have adequate time to visit our exhibitors. They are anxious to greet you.
Okay. So I'm now pleased to introduce this year's Technical Program Committee. First the ITM Committee and then PTTI. So the ITM General Chair, Dr. Okwari Osekas, is a researcher with the Institute of Communication and Navigation at the German Aerospace Center, DLR, where he leads the effort in developing the next generation of alternative PNT systems for aviation. Dr. Osekas' primary interests include GNSS integrity for aviation and for railroad applications, as well as alternatives to GNSS for providing integrity and resilience of communication, navigation, and surveillance systems to radio interference. He received his PhD in electrical engineering from Tufts University in 2014. So Okwari is here in person, over there. Thank you, Okwari. So he is the general chair for ITM. The program chair is Dr. Juan Blanch, who is a senior research engineer at Stanford University, where he works on integrity algorithms for space-based augmentation systems and on RAIM. He received the 2004 Parkinson Award for his doctoral work in ionospheric estimation for SBAS and the 2010 Early Achievement Award from the Institute of Navigation for his work on advanced RAIM, and Juan is here. Thanks, Juan. The PTTI General Chair is Dr. Marina Gerstwolf, who is a research officer with the National Research Council Canada in the Frequency and Time Group, where she has been working since 2009. Dr. Gerstwolf works on timescales, time dissemination, and frequency standards development. The PTTI Program Chair, Dr. Sven Christian Ebenhag, is a senior scientist in photonics and implementations of time and frequency transfer over a national fiber communication network at RISE, the Research Institute in Sweden. He is also working for Big Science Sweden with the goal of increasing Swedish presence at 13 international research facilities. Dr. Ebenhag received his PhD degree in photonics from Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden, with a thesis on frequency transfer techniques and applications in fiber optic communication systems. So both Drs. Gerstwolf and Ebenhag are unable to join us in person because of international travel restrictions. However, we're pleased to have Dr. David Scherer, who organized this year's PTTI tutorials, to fulfill Dr. Ebenhag's on-site duties this year. Dr. Scherer leads the timing and complementary PNT activities at the MITRE Corporation, spanning application of atomic clocks to quantum sensors. His current research involves identifying architectures and applications for next-generation atomic clocks. Previously, he was a physicist at Microchip, where he led several atomic clock research and development programs. He holds a PhD in optical sciences from the University of Arizona. And of course, he is here in person. Thank you very much, Dr. Scherer. Okay, so with that, those formalities out the way, I'd like to have Juan kick things off, so I'll hand over to him, Dr. Blanch, to begin the plenary. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. So let's get started here. So I'm very happy to introduce our keynote speaker for ITM. This is Dr. Alexandre Bayen, who was until very recently the director of the Institute for Transportation Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. He's now taken the position of Associate Provost for the Moffett Field Program Development, also from the UC Berkeley, which is very exciting. He conducts research in modeling and control of distributed parameter systems with applications to transportation systems, air traffic control, highway systems, and distribution systems, water distribution networks. His research involves control of systems modeled by partial differential equations, combinatorial optimization, viability theory, and optimal control. He also didn't write in the bio, but he won multiple awards and prizes, and he's been featured in popular media many times. His work has been quite shown, so I'm very happy to have him as a keynote. So you have the floor, Alex.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you so much. It's almost emotional to be here. It's been 25 years since you and I were trying to solve partial differential equations in college. And so thank you for the invitation, Juan. I'm really grateful to be here today. I believe the last time I spoke with this group was in 2009, maybe in the precursor format of this conference. And at the time, my presentation was on the use of crowdsourced GPS information using smartphones. This was before the Android existed, at the time when iPhone 1 did not even have a GPS. And so about 12 years ago, when I gave that talk, I think Per Enge was the person who invited me to this group. He was also one of our professors at Stanford. And I was trying to explain how one could reconstruct traffic information from mobile devices, something that all of us have now on their phones. And in fact, many of the students who did the work at that time worked either at Google or Apple on these services. And so 12 years later, what this talk is about is how you try to control traffic with mobile devices, which in that case would be autonomous cars. Hence the name of the talk, Lagrangian control at large and local scale for mixed autonomy traffic. I'm going to make the assumption that if anything goes wrong with the presentation, someone is going to speak to me because I cannot see you, but as long as I don't hear anything, I'll make the assumption that we're on track. I like to try to start this talk by showing this graph that is produced by Don McKinsey from UW that was shown for many years by Deputy Assistant Secretary of Energy, Ruben Sarkar, to show that in a future in which autonomy plays a big role for vehicles, things could get much better, where the energy footprint of mobility goes down to up to 60%, but things could get much worse depending on people going faster because autonomy enables it, or empty cars just circling in the city trying to find parking spots. And so part of the motivation for the work today is to show how, with some level of autonomy, one can reduce the energy footprint of congestion. We're not going to solve congestion. That's not what this talk is about, but we're going to try to make traffic more efficient. The tools that we use are what are called micro-simulation models. If this kind of sausage-like or telescope-like looking diagram, you can see different levels at which you can model a city. The model at which, at the level at which we operate is that second from the top, in which essentially you can do simulations that can contain up to maybe 10,000 or 100,000 vehicles, for which you model their trajectory with acceleration, speed, and a certain degree of precision, on which you can plug energy models such as the one developed by Argonne. It's something that in my last talk with this crowd 12 years ago, we couldn't do because the computation was not there, because the data was not there, and because the modeling was still in progress. So it's relatively new in the sense that the convergence of cloud computing, modeling, and machine learning, as you'll see in a minute, has enabled something that we could not do before. For those of you who have not seen microsimulations, it's not particularly glamorous, but that's what it looks like. So you can see, if you can, I don't know how well the movie plays over Zoom, but you can see essentially each vehicle. You can see the speed level like you would see on Google Maps. And it's something which is very mature. There's commercial products such as IMSUN or PTV, VISIM. There's open source framework we use like Sumo. Actually, we use the 2 out of the 3 here. So something which is a very mature, very established. There's 20 years of research in transportation engineering that led to the development of these tools. We take this as a commodity. We don't build them, we use them. And so with that, if you think about the big challenges of the future, data is not so much a challenge in that there is enough data now to do things we could not do before. There's, of course, always challenges with processing data, storing data, cleaning data, but that's not really our job. There's a lot of interesting work in calibration because this data is here. It doesn't mean that you have all the tools at your disposal to calibrate the models. And calibration of these models is actually quite hard. So there's a lot of work to be done there. Computational time is also complex because it's okay to do a simulation with 100,000 vehicles. But the problem is if you're going to embed that in deep reinforcement learning code, now you might need to run 100,000 simulations with 100,000 vehicles. And that is a challenge. And hence, a lot of research happening in the field of control and deep learning with these things. And that's, I think, where a lot of the action will be over the decade to come. And so the call to action, which is ending this year actually with a large-scale experiment we're planning, is we are going to try to demonstrate with a large-scale experiment involving 100 vehicles. I'll talk about this at the end. This summer in Tennessee, how the concepts such as the one I'm going to derive today can be applied in practice. Now, for this, I want to dive a bit back in history. For those of you who like hyperbolic PDs, you'll enjoy this. The first measurement of a traffic jam happened in 1935 in Ohio. And that guy named Bruce Greenshield, you see him here. I think there was some kind of agricultural festival, people showing their tractors and whatnot. So that was enough to create a little traffic jam on a rural road in Ohio. And that's how the first model was born. 20 years later, Lighthill, Whitham, and Richards came up with a hyperbolic PD to use fluid mechanics to model traffic as a flow in pipes. Fast forward about half a century, Sugiyama did that interesting experiment in Japan. He asked people to drive in a circle with the only instruction that they should keep their distances with the person in front. And what's amazing is that this immediately fails. What you can see on that video here, which is not very exciting, is essentially, even in a circle like this, people are creating their own traffic jam because they're not able to regulate. And that's for a good reason. Humans are not good at regulating certain things, and traffic is one of them. These so-called phantom jams or jamitons or traffic instabilities are the cause of a lot of problems on the freeway, and certainly are the cause of a lot of energy inefficiency. Today's talk is about how we fix that on freeways, not just in circles, but on freeways. Now, that experiment was a master hit on YouTube in 2008, in the early ages of YouTube. You can still look it up, it's still there. And then 10 years later, one of our former students, Dan Work, and his team redid the experiment, same experiment in Arizona, but this time they inserted a self-driving vehicle in the ring, which you can see here. Now, right now, it's just driven by a human. But at some point, you'll see this arrow turn red. And when it does, you'll see that the oscillations that are happening again will be smoothed. So I just turned on the autopilot now. And now there's a very simple follower stopper algorithm that smooths the traffic, and the ring starts to float again without instabilities. This was radical because when you look at the OBD readings from the cars, the reduction in oil or in gas, so the energy efficiency is improved by 42%. 42%, it's insane. And it's not modeled, it's actually measured. So that was a turning point in our thinking because that controller, using classical control theory, opened the gate for doing something which maybe this summer will go on the road for real. Now, 1 year later, Kathy Wu, who is a professor at MIT, did this experiment in a framework flow that we created. She did the same ring. There's a self-driving vehicle in red. The only thing it can sense is the blue vehicle in the front, and every other vehicle does what it's doing. And what you see is that these oscillations are happening. And then as soon as the AV turns on the autopilot, then the oscillations are removed and the ring runs smoothly. And so if you're paying attention to the presentation now, you're probably wondering, well, why am I showing you a simulation in 2018 when some people did an actual test in 2017? That seems like going backwards. And the reason is The 2017 test is a controller built on an explicit model of the cars. People went down to car dynamics, took the equations from the book, derived the controller for it. The 2018 simulation has no model of the vehicles. It has a simulator, it's treating it as a black box, and it's using deep reinforcement learning to do the job. And it does exactly as good a job as the controller does. And so what's interesting here is that if you think about this from a historical perspective, there's been over 10,000 articles between the first traffic model and that first experiment. And then that first experiment was such a success that there was probably over 1,000 articles focused on string stability and how to shave things, which led to that fantastic experiment where they did it. But then Kathy, with one article, managed to achieve the same, essentially not leveraging any of the work done in the previous decades. And that's a turning point because it does raise a question, is like, what could you do with model-free machine learning? So in other words, treating the system as a black box, but not looking in the system. And if that's the case, what could you do with it? That was a pivotal time for us, and that's when this project started. And so in all the rest of the presentation, the color code we're going to use is every time you see a red vehicle, it has some level of automation. Every time you see a blue vehicle, that's a vehicle that the red vehicle can sense, LiDAR, radar, you name it, whatever's on board that vehicle, or connected vehicles. And anytime there's a white vehicle, that's a vehicle that's there, it's doing what it's doing, but you cannot see it. You cannot know it's here. So it's a realistic setting. So we try to see if we could generalize this. So this is an example where we figured out, can we use the same algorithm to stabilize a double ring? And it's interesting what it's learning to do here. Actually, the algorithm is learning to be a real jerk. It's essentially preventing the cars from behind to pass him by switching lanes. But that does the trick. It does stabilize the double ring. And you could say, well, what's the big deal? You know, this is something you learn in police academy. In France, we call this a snail operation. I don't know, it probably has a name here as well. And it's a way to slow down the traffic. But it's cool to see that the machine learning learned it. Another interesting thing is, like, if you try this setting where essentially vehicles are using the kind of California politeness stop approach to an intersection where you let the other person go when they come first, that's the worst possible way to manage an intersection, both from a throughput perspective, but also from an energy perspective, because you stop and go. So here, what the algorithm does is it's interesting. It learns how to pick up the right speed so that the length of the snake created by the platoon is exactly half of the length of the loop. And by that, it can go as fast as possible without stopping. That's another thing that the system learned without a model. Essentially, you just use the simulator for that. So you could argue this is interesting. Now it kind of learned to platoon in some ways, or it learned to adjust the speed optimally. Now, if I take this example here, where again, this intersection is managed in this very poor way where cars takes turn, which is really the bad way to do it. And if you apply the same algorithm, now I would have a really hard time to tell you what it's doing. I mean, it's kind of stopping, and now it's going to decide to go, and maybe it'll stop again. But the point is, I could invent a great news and put it on Fox News or something. But the truth is, I really cannot even rationalize or interpretable AI. It doesn't give me any clear story to tell you here. And that's an interesting thing, because now it's like the algorithm came up with something that is not really intuitive. Probably a human would have not figured it out, but yet it does much better than the other settings. So you can do a lot more things with this. So for example, you can do transfer learning, where you learn on the ring and then you deploy it in a place it's never seen before, such as the merge here. So what I showed you before, you learn on the ring. So now the policy is on board that vehicle. And then you apply to the merge. So what's the problem of the merge? The problem of the merge, if you see every once in a while, there's a vehicle coming in that little road here. And when that happens, that creates some jam here, and that propagates backwards. And now you have back propagating waves, and here we go comes the instabilities. And so here, now if you apply the policy that is learn on the ring, watch what happens upstream with the red cars. Now the red cars, they can sense the blue cars, and they can sense the other red cars. And what the red cars do is they slow down. In fact, this car here, it stopped. It stopped, and because it learned on the ring to not catch up with the other vehicle, and it does it in a way that when it catches up, it essentially reinserts into the platoon. And so that's interesting here, because here we go again, it's stopping. So it's almost like a self-driving vehicle learned to be a red light. And if you look at the trajectories, it makes perfect sense, right? So this is what's called the time-space diagram. Cars go forward, forward, forward in time. Every time there is a merge, there's a new car inserted here, and that creates a shock waves that propagates backwards. And now when you insert the vehicles, because the vehicles can sense the shock wave, because they can see, they can sense all the blue vehicles and share the information, essentially it preventively slows down as it learned to do on the ring so that it reconnects with the merge point exactly at the right time to not create a wave. So that's an example of transfer learning where a behavior learned in a specific setting is transferred to another setting. And that was kind of the beginning of our DOE project, in that when we showed that to the DOE, we got them sufficiently excited that they would want to investigate that further, because in simulations, at least, we could see that with up to 10% AVs, you could almost entirely shave these waves, which would provide huge energy savings. And when the story came out, it was picked up by Science Magazine. And two students who did that, Abudi Friday and Eugene Vinitsky, actually Eugene will be on the faculty market next year, so a good person to hire if you're interested in this. We're really excited to see their work picked by Science. And so that was the launch point to what we're doing this year. We've been working on this for now 3 years. Our target is real shock waves on real freeways. So you can see they're happening here, and you can see they're not happening because there's too many people on the road. They're just happening because people are inefficient in the road. Like the freeways have some congestion, but that congestion is not due to excess demand. That congestion is due to people being bad drivers. And there are things where automation is better than humans. There are things where automation is worse. We believe that's one of the things where automation will beat humans by a lot. So we started learning these model on the model of the 210 freeway in Los Angeles, because that's a fully calibrated model that we built 10 years ago for the California Department of Transportation. So there were years and years of data cleaning and management involved in the creation of that model. So it was a high fidelity model. And the way things look when we deploy it on this model is the following way. So I do recognize that there's a bit of a stroboscopic effect over Zoom, so you might not be able to see much. And I'm going to try to narrate what you should be seeing if you were sitting here in my room. So right now, you see a bunch of vehicles that are in white, normal vehicles, and you see vehicles that are in red, vehicles with automations. But right now, the algorithm is not turned on. And so you can see the density in the little box here is very high. And if you look at the outer box, you would see there's waves propagating back and forth. And again, I realize that's hard to see over Zoom, so just believe that you see waves, I see waves. In about 10 seconds, some cars will turn blue. And when that happens, that means the autopilot in the red cars is going to kick in. And when that happens, you will see that the waves will disappear, but the throughput will not change massively. So here we go. If you see some blue vehicles, that means that now the red vehicles are acting. And the waves, if you were able to see before, have disappeared. The total number of cars that go through is roughly the same, and the total time that the vehicles take to go through is also roughly the same. We're not solving congestion. We're just dealing with it in a way that people don't have to stop and go. And beyond the obvious energy savings, stop and goes are also known to be the major producer of accidents on the road. So there's also safety benefits that come from this. So that's the concept we're trying this summer in Tennessee. Right now, I'm showing it for the 210 for historical reasons, because we had good models, but that's what we're going to deploy in Tennessee over the summer. And so the goal here is there's a test bed in Tennessee on the I-24. This one that I showed before is on the I-210 in LA. And our objective with the I-24 is to shave these waves. And then my colleague and former student, Dan Work, is working on the I-24 motion test bed. It's a $15 million test bed deployed by the Tennessee Department of Transportation, where they have poles every 500 meters with a high-resolution 6-pack video camera systems to monitor everything on the freeway, so we can do a before-after analysis and completely uncorrelated data analysis to demonstrate the benefits that we claim we will be able to achieve with these algorithms. And so when we train the algorithms, the idea is that essentially the reward is a form of a negative of the energy consumed, but we do have to add a few tricks in there, which I won't have time to describe today, because if you do that, the obvious solution is to stop everybody. By that time, you consume zero energy. So obviously there needs to be a little bit more to it, and maybe more to that later if we have time. There's also interesting things we do with imitation learning where, I was a bit radical before when I said we don't use models. I mean, at the end, we don't want to throw in the garbage 80 years of research in traffic modeling. So we also do develop explicit controllers. And the interesting part is that with imitation learning, we can learn them through a neural net. And once you learn them, you can learn a family of them, and then you can learn them in a way that maybe you don't need as many inputs as you would otherwise. Many of these explicit algorithms require measurements of speeds at various locations on freeways. But with imitation learning, if you learn a family of them, maybe you don't need these measurements. And that's what we're showing here, which is also great, because if that's the case, then you rely less on V2V communication. And that's kind of another idea we have. I mean, when we work with systems like the Bay Bridge, which right now we're just doing in simulation, the idea is that, these metering lights are effective. They've been running for 40 years. In fact, some of my predecessors at Berkeley did the very first algorithms that went on it. But with distributed control, similar ideas like the ones I've shown before can be used to do distributed metering, in which essentially cars selectively hold vehicles before the choke point, thereby in a sense, prolongating the time before the choking time. And that's something, once we're done with our Tennessee test, we might try in the future. Now, before we went to the field and tried it on real vehicles, we wanted to try it in hardware. So I went to the University of Delaware with my good friend, Andreas Malikopoulos. And there we worked on sequencing problems. If you see on the right, there's I'm going to play that movie again so that you can see. On the left is a typical roundabout scenario in a mini city that he built. And the self-driving vehicles are in blue, and the human-driven vehicles are just the other vehicles. And then with the same algorithms, what you can do is you can maximize the throughput by minimizing flush time. So watch carefully the last vehicle that is going to exit the roundabout on the left, and watch the last vehicle that will exit on the right. The hammer here is the last one that gets in. Look at the order in which the blue cars have positioned the other cars, and see that the hammer, which will exit last here on the right, exits the roundabout long before the other vehicles do here. And that's another application of the same algorithm, but this time on a scheduling and sequencing problem. So we tried this on a variety of hardware platforms. This is at the last CPS meeting right before the COVID, and the students is Fengyu Wu and Eugene Vinitsky is right here. And then before I want to talk a little bit about this Tennessee test we're doing now, I also wanted to show that there are other branching out interesting avenues here. So right now, this is the way the deep reinforcement learning works, right? There is an agent and it selects some action, then that goes into the simulator. The simulator is a black box. We don't want to know what's inside. And from that simulator, we pick up the state of the system. So that's important. You don't see how it's computed, but you see the state. You see every position, every velocity, every acceleration. And from that, you can compute the reward. Okay. And that's what the reinforcement learning algorithm uses, because then it goes in the agent, finds a new action until it finally has improved all of it. So every reinforcement algorithm that you've probably seen before works like that. That's classic. Now, what if we tried to also remove the notion of the state and just computed the reward? So by that, I mean, right now we have access to the vehicle, the trajectory and whatnot, but we might be able to not use that. And so what if instead of using that knowledge, we used a picture of that knowledge? So think about an aerial photograph, or in the case of a simulation, essentially pixels. And the amazing thing is that even with that, which is a very degraded form of information, in fact, a lot of you work on GPS, so a lot of you have used Kalman filtering at least once in your life, and you know that access to state when a system is not observable is complicated. Well, what if instead of accessing the state, you add a picture of the state? That's what we're doing here. And the amazing part is that, okay, you have to change a little bit the algorithm, but and the reward, but the thing works equally well. And so in some settings, whether you can access the state or just a picture of the state doesn't make a difference to your learning. And you can do this in the centralized fashion. So that's kind of like flying a helicopter over a city and watching, or essentially having a movie with a full rendering. But you can also do it in a decentralized manner by saying, okay, I'm just going to assume that I can watch around my car in a decentralized fashion. So if I'm centralized, I'm on the left, and if I'm decentralized, I'm on the right. And we've not fully solved that one. So there's still a lot of things to do, but that's extremely promising. And one of the reasons why that's exciting is that the complexity of that method is essentially correlated to the size of the picture, not the number of vehicles. So that scales really well. And the reason why that might change the world in the next 10 years is because if you can learn in this, and now extrapolate to 5 or 10 years from now, every car coming out of the factory will have some form of detection where they can essentially sense the vehicles around. When that information comes, that's essentially the same setting in observation as the middle case, except it's with real data. So once these vehicles are connected, and again, that's not happening tomorrow, that's probably happening in 10 years, there is an opportunity for learning at scale, and that's the first layer we're appealing today. And so the reason why we chose to do that is you might remember a few years ago, Google came up with a Q-learning algorithm application to Pong. If you were like me, a kid in the 70s, you probably remember playing Pong on the left. Essentially, it's a game where you can break the bricks by having a ball bounce on some board and into the bricks. You can see it on the left. That game was like really what kids would play in Paris when I was like 10 years old. Here, the amazing thing that Google did when they did that is that they didn't build a model of how a ball bounces. They just watched the pixels, used the reward in the reinforcement learning function, and the thing essentially taught itself to play Pong by watching Pong. And if you remember Pong from the days you were playing it as a kid, there's a very good technique which consists in digging a hole on the left or on the right, because then the ball gets stuck on the top. And when you do that, you can essentially break a lot of bricks without a lot of effort. And what's amazing is that Q-learning algorithm figures it out. So if you keep watching the movie, you'll see that after many minutes of training, it finally figured out winning strategies by digging holes like it's doing right now. On the left, you can see this hole. At some point, it's going to manage to get the ball in it. And when that happens, the ball will essentially break a lot of the bricks. Okay, here we go. You can see it's happening right now. So this was very inspirational because that was kind of a motivation of trying to get rid of the state, in the sense that only uses pixels to learn. And there's a chance that the same could be happening with traffic one day. I mean, another application is the game of Go was the world champion was beaten by an algorithm that did very unconventional moves, and that was also very surprising to the community. So that's what gives us hope that this can be a game changer in the context of traffic. So of course, there's a lot of work to do. We're not done with that, and now I'm going to return to the physical world and show you what we want to do this summer. So the framework we built is an integration of 3 things, which when we launched it in 2018 was really new and had never been done before. It was the integration of a micro simulation, Sumo and IMSUN, we had 2 at the time that we used, on the cloud, so AWS at the time. And we were integrating this with deep reinforcement learning libraries that were coming out of the AMP Lab and other places. In fact, IMSUN was built a special build of IMSUN on the cloud for us. Before that, it was running on old stacks of hardware, and we were the first use case for them to run on the cloud. This was built for a flow, and of course, it's great now because also now they're run on the cloud, so it also improved their customer base. So this is the framework that we're using to train our vehicles. We have these Lego blocks that we're using to train them to more and more complex things. We even created a form of Mujoko of traffic for that we launched in 2018 at Coral. And now we have a software architecture that is professional grade. We have 3 OEMs that work with us on it, Toyota, Nissan, and GM. And we have a leaderboard in which we can compare the algorithms. And that's the pipelining we're using for the test we're running this summer. So the pipelining essentially enables us to compare algorithms and in particular, see how they operate in different settings. And we can even see their evolution over time so that when we go to the field, we have the ability to launch ones with specific features we like. We have a user community. I'm going to skip that. And so the team now has grown a lot since we started. We have 5 universities, and I mentioned 3 OEMs. And our base of deployment switched from California to Tennessee. We're still going to test in California with a 680, but most of the deployment work we'll do is on the I-24 motion in Tennessee, and I'll explain why in a minute. For those of us who are still in California, we're also working with the California Department of Transportation, as well as Contra Costa Transportation Authority in Danville, because there is interest in maybe using more advanced features of V2V, and that's something specific to Nissan. But in the meantime, the main deployment in the summer is going to be on this stretch of the 24 in Nashville. It's a crazy freeway. There's an accident almost every hour. People behave very aggressively, and there's a lot of waves also due to the topography. So it's a good testing ground for us, even though, of course, that's very stressful. So that's what the test site looks like. You can see 3 of the cameras that were used before, and we're going to deploy these high-resolution cameras now every 500 meters. And so this is the team that was there over the summer. We did the first test this summer with 10 vehicles, and 4 of them with level of automations. And this year we're going to do the same test with 100 vehicles with level of automation, so probably 150 vehicles total, counting the measuring vehicles. So this is what it looked like. It was kind of hard to execute in COVID in some ways, but we're parking the cars in the parking lot and then sequencing them on the freeway with help of the local police. It's actually hard to get cars in the platoon on the freeway, so we had to get the police to get us access. So they block the road. We get it on the freeway, and then we can test. And then once we're on the freeway, we line them up. So in the last year's test, we just did it in 1 lane because we had few vehicles. But this year we'll do it in all the lanes at the same time, and then the vehicles start smoothing traffic. And when they do that, we have a ground team that is looking from our headquarters and just monitors everything which is happening, also using the video data for safety purposes and computing the energy in real time, which we will do also when we have the 100 vehicles. And this is what the team looks like. So if you were kind of picturing this from a helicopter, what it looks like when we do 1 lane is we have a self-driving vehicle, level 2-ish, with our automation. Then a bunch of people come in, come out, do crazy things in the middle. Then we have a sensing vehicle. Then again, crazy people just doing their things here. And then the second one, and then again, people, then sensing vehicle, etc. This is both for testing purposes as well as for calibration purposes. And probably next year, we won't have many blue vehicles other than the ones seen by the red vehicles, and we'll have 100 red vehicles. So we have different scenarios. We've tried this on different lanes. And it was very stressful because this is the first time you have to be very careful with your algorithms, especially when people cut in front of you. Algorithms have a tendency to overreact, and that can be very stressful. So that was very helpful. This is what the preliminary data looks like. We have essentially, you can see we have 2 waves that we caught on that particular run. So the very interesting feature for us, which essentially was our green light to do the big experiment, was this is the energy consumption of the vehicles. And if there's one graph you should remember from this, because that's real, that's not simulation, well, so some of it is modeling, but this is real data, is the positive effect we have on the freeway. So this histogram represents the reduction in consumption of the fuel. So it's very big for the AV because you're running this algorithm, so you're doing better because you're smoothing and you're the first beneficiary. But the amazing thing is that it also induces the vehicles behind you, who are just normal people, to do better, because now that you're smoothing, you're also helping the people in the back. Now, they might be upset because you're going slower than you could, but the truth is they don't even know it, but they're saving gas. And that's the beauty of it, is that right now this algorithm is decentralized. There's no coordination. And even with no coordination, you're not only doing better for yourself, but you're helping others to do better. And there's also an equity angle here in that, I mean, who's going to run this? Someone with a very good vehicle, a rich person who has a Tesla or something like this down the road, or the high-end vehicle that can support that. But who benefits? People who don't have these vehicles, who are behind. You could view this as, I mean, if I try to characterize it or explain to a 5 years old, as like the rich people essentially are helping the poor people to save money on gas. And that's the way I explain my 6 years old what I'm doing. But this equity angle is important because the benefit is really a benefit for everybody. And that's very important, particularly in California. I think I'm about at the end of the talk here. I think I was going to leave 5 or 10 minutes for questions. If you are interested in the deep reinforcement learning libraries we're putting together, it's all open source and free for download. So you can go to our Flow website at Berkeley. And if you're interested in the consortium we're building, this is a bigger consortium now because it has 5 universities and 3 OEMs. And there's a lot of people who are talking with us because this is not only interesting to OEMs, This is interesting to sensing companies. This is definitely interesting to companies with interest in machine learning, in particular vision-based machine learning, but also just plain machine learning. So any overlap with your interest on any of these fronts is we're always happy to discuss with people. Once we're done with the 100-car experiment this summer, we'll have a phase 2 project where we'll do probably a lot more deployment, this time with real people, not just our vehicles. And with this, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to stop sharing. I can't see you, but maybe that way you can see me. I'll be very happy to take any question you have. Again, I want to thank the organizer for inviting me, and Juan, thank you for brokering this. I wish I could be here with you in person. I'm still working from home like many of us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. That was really very exciting, very interesting results. I look forward to the results of the experiment. Are there any questions for Dr. Bayan?
Hi. First of all, thanks for the presentation. It was very interesting. My name is Marcos Pangro from KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. I actually have one question regarding the knowledge that the autonomous vehicles need in this setting. Is it only the vehicle in front and the vehicle behind, or the knowledge of, for example, a V2V network that gives you a broader understanding of your environment, or the access to a map improve even further the system? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the question. And when you go back to KTH, give my greetings to Kali Johansson, a good friend of mine working in similar problems on trucks in Sweden. So this is a very good question. And it's true that I have jumped back and forth between different assumptions. In the ring, the red vehicle only sees the vehicle in the front, and what it can measure is speed, relative speed and ego speed and all speeds, and accelerations. In the 8 figure, you needed V2V, you needed to have V2V for all of us, all of the vehicles, for it to work, because it's more complex. If you go back to all the movies one after one, if you rewatch the recording, you'll see that, yes, in some cases, the vehicle behind is blue. That means you need to see what's happening behind you. In some of the cases, it's not. That means you don't need to see it. So the synthetic answer to your question is that it depends on the setting. Of course, in an ideal world, you would only need to see the person in the front. And so what we're doing in Tennessee, what we did in Tennessee last year, the only thing you could see is the vehicle in the front. And what that means is you can, of course, measure your own speed and acceleration. And then with radar and a few other sensors on board the vehicle, we could measure the car in front's speed and acceleration as well. And of course, heading between the vehicles. So when we did the test last summer, that's all we took into account, mostly because you alluded to V2V or V2X. We don't want to build an architecture this year, V2V or V2X. It's too hard. I mean, it can be done, but it's just too much work. So our aim is to see if we could bypass it. Down the road, it will happen, and then that means things will get easier. But for now, we can't make that assumption. And final part of the answer, this year, we are, in addition to doing just sensing for the vehicle in the front, we're going to probably add one thing is we're going to measure the flow at the very end of the freeway and broadcast it to the vehicle. So it's really I2V, but it's really a very tiny I2V. You're just broadcasting traffic information in real time, because we believe that can improve the efficiency of the vehicles, because it does give some ahead information. But this is very minor. So maybe short summary, it's really just the vehicle in the front right now. And then when V2V and V2X becomes a reality, so say 5 or 10 years from now, factoring in the cycle of car production, then I think it will give us for opportunities for implementation of coordination, more coordination, which we can only do in the lab for now.
Do you do things to make it robust for mechanical breakdowns and things like that? And what price do you pay for that?
So this is also a very interesting question. There are 2 ways we have approached robustification. On some of the cars we operate, we feed our controller through the ACC system of the car. What that means is that we don't override the cruise controller. We prescribe things to it, because that way we can benefit from the built-in safety that these systems have. OEMs have worked for years and years and years to make these things robust, because they know that people can fall asleep on the wheel, or that things can happen, and the ACC system should take as much as possible into account. So that's I don't want to say that's the lazy way to do it, but I would say that's the most risk-free way to do it, because you rely on the robustness work that the OEMs do to their vehicles. Now, in addition to that, we are also building what we call our own safety filters. And so at the end, telling the ACC to do something is not very good, because the ACC has a 2-second delay, so it reduces the efficiency. So even though we do it, we don't like it. We like to prescribe our own acceleration, because you can control the car tighter. But then the question you ask is very relevant. That can be dangerous, especially in Tennessee. People have a tendency to cut in really aggressively in front of you on that freeway, and that creates a problem, because the algorithms overreact. So essentially, we have a safety filter that we've built that relies on reachability analysis, which is essentially a way where there's a super layer of safety that takes over. If relative speed is too high, so you're going to crash in front, and heading is too small, you're really close, the thing takes over and slows you down abruptly. And it's funny, because when we did that first, we built it too conservatively. So our car would brake really hard when it didn't really need to, which was okay, because it's better safe than sorry. But it was really not enjoyable as a ride. Like, people would be scared by how conservative it was. So it was kind of a little bit of play of trying to loosen a little bit the requirements, so it would still be safe, but not be crazy brakes when there was no need for it.
Hello, thank you for your talk. My name is Chris Flood from the University of Colorado Boulder. I could be wrong, but in your simulations, it seemed like the white cars were fairly well behaved. Like, they stayed in their lane. They didn't do any, the crazy human lane switching or anything like that. Did you factor that in at all to other simulations, or does the performance change significantly in, your initial road tests?
You have very good eyes. We trained the algorithms without factoring in the lane change, because we didn't think it would be a big deal, and that bit us. So the movies I show predate the first test we did last summer. And it was scary, because there were so many lane changes that were not in the learning set of the algorithm that the safety filter was kicking in all the time. So this year, we have incorporated a lane change model, and we're training the algorithms on it, so that it learns to react before. It's just frankly, between you and me, lane change models are difficult to build, because humans behave very differently, even based on geography, based on time of the day, based on a lot of different factors. So it's hard. It's easy to build a longitudinal model. They're still well behaved, but it's easy. But lane change models that are realistic for a setting are hard to build. And that's going to be a problem, not just for us, but that's going to be a problem in general, is that I think most of the algorithms in this field will be learning on data sets which are imperfect. We have, and that's maybe my concluding statement, is that until the video cameras are fully deployed, which happens also sometimes in the summer, we won't have many good data sets to learn from. So it's mostly hypothetical data sets we've built ourselves. Once the camera network is out, that data doesn't exist, but we will see every lane change on that freeway at all the time. And there is the hope that we can, in the next generation algorithms we deploy, have much better model that take that into account, because that is the most, what you pointed out in your question, is the most stressful problem we have right now, and we're working on it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Let's thank Dr. Baya once more.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I wish I could have been in person. Thank you, Juan. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so our next speaker hardly needs any introduction within this group. It's Dr. Darota Braziska. She's a Lauber B. Strange Endowed Chair, University Distinguished Professor, and Vice President for the Knowledge Enterprise at the Ohio State University. She's an ION past president, an ION Royal Institute of Navigation and IAG Fellow, a member of the National Academy of Engineering, and currently serves on the National PNT Advisory Board. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you for this introduction, and thank you for allowing me to take a mask off. So thank you for actually allowing me 15-20 minutes today to speak about IRVA, which is kind of taking a little bit of a detour from the classical PNT topics, but by the time I am done with the talk, I hope that I can convince you that there is a connection between this community and what I'm bringing from the IRVA side. So what is IRVA? It stands for Engineering Research Visioning Alliance, and I think the simplest definition of IRVA is to say it's a partnership. It's the multidisciplinary cross-sector partnership between academia, industry, nonprofits, government, economic development organizations, anything which has to do with bringing forward ideas for future engineering research and defining the national program when the research engineering should advance. So it's actually sponsored by the National Science Foundation. It's not a research project, it's the new platform, it's a new organization that the team that I have a pleasure and honor to lead actually won in national competition ran just at the beginning of COVID in 2020. So let me begin with a brief video so you can have a first look of what the message is, and then I'll continue with some
the Engineering Research Visioning Alliance, established by the National Science Foundation to develop bold and transformative new engineering research directions. A core partnership of the Big Ten Academic Alliance, the EPSCoR IDEA Foundation, and UIDP. We represent every U.S. state. There's a seat at the table for everyone in the engineering research community. IRVA is a network of networks. We've designed an organizational engine that crosses boundaries and enables 6 key groups to work together to identify and develop new engineering research directions and build unity across the community. Engaging stakeholder groups across numerous sectors, who provide input for ideation through a range of visioning activities. IRVA's diverse network of allies, government labs, professional societies, nonprofits, students, educators, industry associations, venture organizations, and champions of the future of engineering research provide the brain trust that fuels the IRVA engine. To build collaboration, spark next-generation ideas, solve our grand challenges, protect our resources, train the workforce of the future, create a vision for engineering research leadership that will unleash discovery and innovation and increase prosperity. IRVA, the Engineering Research Visioning Alliance.
All right, so hopefully with this video, we were able to tell you a little bit on a higher level terms what IRVA is all about. I'd like to now bring this to your attention a little bit more and explain why I'm here, what I would like to see ION do, if possible, and how we can work together to essentially fulfill the mission of bringing forward the new engineering research ideas and shape the research program in this country. So if you look at the mission to identify and develop bold and transformative new engineering research directions and to catalyze the engineering community's pursuit of innovative, high-impact research that benefits society, it's a tall order, but frankly, really what we are doing, we establish a platform, we establish an organization, and we serve as conveners for those multiple groups of stakeholders that you see in the organizational chart. And yes, we are present in 50 states, and we have representation from just about every sector of engineering. So how do we do it? I want to start with the high-level goals. That there are 3 primary goals that IRVA set upon in our strategic plan. So in order to increase coordination among communities, this is the blue part of this circle, which you can see the goals actually interact and fit to one another. So we essentially collect information from various stakeholders to understand what's ripe for research interest in a specific area, in specific domain. What are the low-hanging fruit that we can actually work together on to solve those problems? And again, the underlying objective is to solve those huge vaccine, societal, national, global problems, but at the same time make sure that US stays at the forefront of the innovation. Now, once we have all the information and we have coordinated the societies, the groups of stakeholders, we then, like I said, we create a process to identify future research priorities, and that's essentially core of what ERVA does. It's called visioning, and I'm going to get to it in a moment. Once we have gone through a visioning event, which brings together a multitude of experts at different stages of career, different affiliations, different, I would say, expertise, they jointly ideate and provide directions towards research. And I'm going to give you a specific example in a second, not to be too esoteric. Once we have the outcome of that event, we actually produce a report. So a report really would recommend to federal government, to agencies, to anyone who wants to listen to us, what is the direction of research that we should take and potentially when the investment can go. I want to make sure we cannot recommend anything, and we are not an executive body. We are the scientific research organization which can produce the report, which then anyone who wishes to look at it will look at it and act on it. So very quickly, how we do it, how the platform operates, we really are the convener, independent convener of those stakeholder groups that I mentioned already a couple of times. So we bring them together and to facilitate ideation and development of those ideas and recommendations or suggestions, right? Through those activities, we actually, our mission is to catalyze the not only engineering community, but engineering plus towards formulation of those new research directions, but at the same time catalyze the potential for future research programs, for new research programs, for new investments in research, and essentially bring this out to the society. I forgot to mention that one of our stakeholders is just the society. We collect feedback from regular citizens as well, trying to understand how they see as the important engineering contribution to solving their problems. And of course, communicate our finding in terms of those reports. We are working on our first report as we speak. So how do we see a success as a brand new organization, new child on the block, with sometimes people asking us questions, so why are you here? What's different between ERVA and national academies, or ERVA and some other organization, let's say IEEE, which has really a lot of different sub-organizations there. So I would say fundamental difference, we are not really membership driven. We invite everyone. We are a diverse, open forum that invites anyone to the table, and we hear voices of those who otherwise probably couldn't have a voice at the table. So in our domain, the direction of research is no longer defined just by the top 10 research programs in the country, because we see the value across the sectors, across the domain in academia, and also across the domains of the level of the, I would say, professional advancement of the people who work with us. So we will be successful if we, and this is a 5-year program, we are in year 1, we just got stood up in April this year. So we would be successful if we manage to convene inclusive and diverse body of engineer plus stakeholders. When I say plus, this means we invite also scientists, policymakers, ethicists, anyone who can contribute to faster, more efficient, smarter, better way to solve a significant vaccine problem that society is facing. And if we have them in one room and have them speak with one voice to do what ERVA is designed to do, that it would be success. If we increase pace and scale of innovation, and we believe that by doing so, also with the speed we are able to convene those groups and ideate on the topics, is going to contribute to the pace and scale of innovation. Now, we also believe that ERVA will contribute to continuing American leadership in technological innovation. We are squarely focused on bringing all voices, anyone who can contribute to make this happen. And of course, one of the things we also feel is very important is to reach out to society and increase their awareness to understand how important is engineering in our daily life. People oftentimes don't realize how important, how consequential is the engineering domain. So we would like to make sure that people also understand that. A few words about the partners. You've seen the map. We are at 50 states and 3 territories. We have Big Ten Academic Alliance, which is 14 schools. There is something wrong with the base we are using to calculate the Big Ten. EBSCOR IDEA Foundation, as you can see, actually brings enormous diversity in the minority serving institutions. And UIDP, those of you who don't know, it's kind of an offshoot of National Academy of Engineering. They were generated as a next step to the GWIRE program, which is squarely related to academic and industry partnerships. So those 3 organizations, you can see by statistics how much they bring to the table already, so are very well positioned to work with the community, society, and bring them all together. Very briefly, want to recognize my colleagues, Barry Johnson, University of Virginia. He is a co-PI on this. All people you can see, except for Jennifer, are co-PIs. Tony Boconfuso is representing UIDP. Barry Johnson is the academic partner at large, and it's from he's from University of Virginia. Then we have Idil Shamiloglu, University of New Mexico. He is a co-PI. And Charles Johnson Bay of Booz Allen Hamilton is also a co-PI, but he has a special role. He's an industry liaison to IRVA. And Jennifer Corinci is our executive director. The office is located in Columbia, South Carolina. We have regular staff, and we work with them pretty much on a daily basis. Just to give you a flavor of engagement, aside from the partnership organizations, we also have advisory board, we have standing council, and 3 working groups. And again, we strive for geographic specialty, sector, etc., gender diversity to make sure that we actually capture just about the whole cross-section in the engineering ideation across the country and universe. Please notice ION is currently an affiliate of IRVA. So IRVA is a network of network. You've heard this term during the video. It's a partnership. It's really based on partners and affiliates who want to work with us, who recognize the value of partnering, who recognize the value of inter and cross-disciplinarity and work with us. So notice we have National Academy of Engineering, we have National Academy of Inventors, we have a number of professional organizations and also industry consortia to work with us. And again, right now we have 18 of those on board, and we are working with more. Now, the question is, what do we want of them? And I will get to this also in more detail at the moment, but essentially, this is an opportunity for us not just to work together under IRVA umbrella. It's an opportunity for, let's say, ION, because we're speaking right now at ION, to come up with the idea for next ideation session, determine the broader umbrella of what is the topic that this community could move forward, opening to more interdisciplinary, more participation, and then be a lead, be a thought leader in this particular area, right? So then ION would be the lead envisioning, and we will then work together with other organizations to make sure that again, we first of all get some recommendations related to the research, the report is created, ION's name is on it, and we are able to pass it on to federal government. Now, so V in our logo stands for vision, and this is really IRVA's heart and soul. I know it sounds a bit pathetic, but this is really what it is. We are there to make sure that the visioning events are successful. So visioning events are really opportunities to, again, bring those diverse voices to talk together, ideate, come up with ideas, and then define the path forward. And for us to do that, the 3 primary goals, how we really structure those events is we identify specific areas that are nascent or require additional exploration with the potential for the greatest return on investment. What does that mean? It means we are reaching out to different societies. We surveyed, actually, we sent an extensive survey to engineering community nationwide. we got feedback. The questions were, what are the most vexing problems in your area of interest, in your region, in the world, in this country? So we essentially have already some feedback after surveying the society. Again, we can work directly with either a single society or multiple societies to continue narrowing down those topics. Now, the attendees are, as I said before, are cross-sector researchers. They can help us, help IRVA identify those topics which are maybe less explored, maybe flying on the radar screen, but are extremely important and needs to be brought to the national prominence to make sure that the research is done in this area. The format, it's a different meeting than the regular meeting. We just had the first one, first Vision Week event in December. It was a group of about 110 attendees. Everyone was essentially handpicked through our network of networks. And then we had, I would say, the research intelligence provided by Elsevier to set the tone of what it is all about. And the discussion topic was impact of engineering on climate change or solving a climate problem. So again, those experts in different areas were brought together. They work in breakout sessions. They came up with ideas, with recommendations. We are currently working on the report. The upcoming event in March is essentially leveraging biology to power engineering impact. This really was commissioned by NSF. And they have, again, expectation of IRVA to be agile, to be inclusive, to bring information as fast and in the most effective and efficient way with the very clear recommendations. So again, we are right now working on the second event. So what are the outcomes? I think I briefly already mentioned the outcomes of those events. We identify the lines of research which are ripe for engineering community pursuit. We are serving as essentially as a synthesizer, as a platform when we are bringing voices together and then collectively try to resolve those big research challenges. And then if we achieve the broader participation of research from a wide range of academic, industry, government, and other organizations, again, this is the core of the IRVA engine. As I said before, IRVA is a stakeholder community, so what's there for you as an organization or individual? How do we operate, how we engage you and other organizations? So ION could invite IRVA to listening session, which means a few of us will come to another ION meeting, and we have a smaller group or maybe a couple of breakout sessions when we will listen to what are the problems in PNT community that we IRVA should potentially rise to the higher level and work with others under ION leadership on that. Such as idea for Vision Week events, again, anyone, any individual, any organization can always reach out to us and bring it forward. We can have ION representation on the Standing Council or Advisory Board and working groups, so you can nominate, recommend, or self-nominate. We are looking for people who are interested on the national impact of engineering and inter and cross-disciplinarity. So the benefit to all our affiliates really is visibility professionally, increased visibility beyond your own area when you normally reside. There is a broader spectrum. You open up your aperture for your organization and for yourself, because individuals could actually affiliate with us as so-called champions. And then you are the first one to learn of what's going on, what are the next events, what are the topics, where the reports are, and so on and so forth. So we are present on pretty much all major electronic platforms, so please join us. Visit irvacommunity.org to learn more about us and get involved. Thank you so much for your time. I'll be happy to answer any questions or chat with you. I'll be here today and tomorrow. And I'm looking forward to getting more of my ION colleagues engaged with IRVA. Thank you.
Hi, this is Christine Hackman from NRL. Thank you for the talk. You had a slide about what does success look like, and the first bullet under it, I'll just wait till you get there.
Yep.
Whoops.
Right there.
Right. Okay, the end of the bullet is unify them to speak in one voice.
Right.
And this comes up more than once in your talk.
Right.
And so I, of course, got wildly curious about this. So you got a bunch of different people in the room. and you have the session, and in the end you make a report. And so how do you get all those different people to speak in one voice? I mean, how is that done?
It's not easy. Well, thank you. It's an excellent question, because this is really the primary objective, but also a hurdle for us, right? But I have to tell you, when you bring people of various backgrounds under the topic that majority of them, if not all of them, decided it's crucial, like climate change, right? How do we combat climate change? It's amazing that when you actually formulate the right question and put them in front of them, they're gonna speak in their professional voices, but also listen to others. And in the end of the session, it's actually amazing how they come together with recommendations. So again, it's not that I'm gonna make a civil engineer, chemical engineer, right? But if they see that there's a blurring boundary between those two organizations or professions, they're gonna work together. And again, I'm generalizing. We had one event, 120 people, but very successful. So hopefully, in 5-year time, we will have more of those successes, and maybe we'll be able to really, I would say, introduce a little bit more faith, and maybe faith is the wrong word, really have more champions of inter and cross-disciplinary and cross-sector partnerships. This is really when academia has to go these days anyway. Academics right now really should work much closer with industry. Government requires this. If you look at the federal sponsoring program, it's all about large interdisciplinary and cross-sector partnerships. So we are there to try to create a new model, a better model maybe, for those partnerships. I hope it answered your question. But it's a difficult, it's probably the most difficult. Right. Just be patient and persistent and keep meeting with people, right?
I didn't see really anything in the substance of your talk about the general public, but I thought you mentioned it, that you were going to get input from them. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so, thank you. I should have actually emphasized this a little bit more. So we are on social media, and we also have newsletter. We actually are quite present and reaching out to various societies, but those societies are also asked to reach out outside their societies. We also look into like science museums, some local organizations in the community that can actually tell the local community about us. So we have actually non-engineers, regular citizens as champions of IRVA, so they get communication from us, they can understand what we do. Now, the newsletter at the moment is sent to all of our partners, whoever is right now on the list of affiliates, but this is part of our outreach program, and we specifically develop an outreach program to really work with the community in a much more focused and engaged way. Thank you for that question. Thank you so much again.
So we have a break now. We'll resume at 11 with the Ptti Keynote. Okay, so we're going to resume now with the Ptti Keynote, and we are fortunate to have Dr. David Scherer. He leads the timing and complementary PNT activities at the MITRE Corporation, spanning applications of atomic clocks to quantum sensors. He holds a PhD in optical sciences from the University of Arizona. The floor is yours.
Okay, let me get this. How's that? Good. Thank you very much, Juan, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. Make sure this works. Okay, so I'd like to share some material, some big picture ideas about the field of commercial atomic clocks. And these are ideas that I've been thinking about for some time that really started when I was at Symmetricom Microchip. There I had the opportunity to be a lab scientist in the R&D physics department working on several DARPA-funded projects related to next-generation atomic clocks. Got to work alongside the factory in CSAC and rubidium clocks, hydrogen masers, cesium beam tubes, a whole slew of different commercial products. Since I've been at MITRE for 3 years now. I'm now on the government side, advising many US government sponsors in applications and future directions for clocks. So there's a couple people in the US that have worked in both in the commercial side as well as on the government side in the field of atomic clock products. I've talked to all of them. It's a small group, and I'm really happy to share some insights that I have from incorporating both of those two directions in the field. So that's where we're coming from in terms of my background and what we want to share. So the ideas we want to share are, how good can commercial atomic clocks get in the near future? Who cares about that? And how does clock quality scale with size or weight or power or cost? What are some of the physics package architectures that are best suited for future innovations? These are some of the themes that we'll be talking about. So here's the main idea. We can make clocks better. When we make them better, they'll enable a whole slew of new applications which we're not even really aware of today. We're not doubting that clocks can get better. Right? But we want to put a little bit of realism into how much they can improve in the near term. We often hear these reports in the popular press, performance like a cesium beam tube, in the size of a raspberry. And that's not very likely. Instead of focusing on these kind of pie-in-the-sky improvements, we'd like to make recommendations for making the entire industry better, with specific recommendations for government, industry, academics, national labs, and standards organizations, all aimed at improving the future performance and quality of these commercial products. So I'll start with a disclaimer. This talk is about industrial atomic clock products. And it's kind of annoying to keep saying those 4 words for the whole time. So I'll just say atomic clocks. But what I'm talking about is commodity electronics products a regular person can buy by picking up the phone, calling a company, and placing an order for a lot of them, like 100 of them. Okay? Like commodity things that you can find. We're not going to be talking about recent demonstrations that are funded by DARPA, custom one-off space clocks, academic demonstrations, high-performance laboratory frequency standards, the whole slew of different things. Non-atomic oscillators. We're really focused on commodity electronics products for the bulk of the material that's in the presentation, which I may accidentally call atomic clocks, but we're specifically talking about products. Of course, those products are a subset of a much bigger class of systems, the whole slew of atomic frequency standards. Thankfully, since we're at ION, we don't really need to justify the role of atomic clocks. This is well familiar to anyone attending a PTTI conference. Atomic clocks underpin many different aspects of how we function in modern society, from navigation to communications, sensing, power grid, financial transactions. All of these are enabled by time and frequency from atomic clocks. And that's not special. There are a lot of other products that have revolutionized the world, changed the way civilian and military life operates. What's special about clocks, though, is the number of clocks that are used to have this global impact. So, again, clocks aren't special. There's a number of physics-based, sort of Nobel Prize-winning physics innovations that have changed the world. Here's my short list. Transistors, lasers, digital cameras, fiber optics, LED, there are a lot of things. Like, the world is different now because of these things. But atomic clocks are different because most of these, you need the thing at the point to do the thing that you're talking about. Transistors, for example, you need a lot of transistors at the location that you're at to do the thing. Clocks are different because time transfer is good. So it takes a really small number of clocks to have a big global impact. Case of GPS, for example, depending on if you count the cold spares in space and how many ground stations you count, it takes like 200 atomic clocks to operate the whole constellation, space and ground. It's not the case in these other innovative products. Right? And that has ramifications for the industry. Because of that, there's a small number of companies that are interested in this field. It's a slow-moving, stagnant field because time transfer is good. We'll see some of the economic and sort of pace of growth innovation impacts as a result of that as we keep going. So transition here to talk a little bit about evolution of commercial atomic clock products over the past several decades. So this is not intended as a history lesson. If you want to really understand the history of commercial clocks, I'd recommend 2 excellent review articles by innovators in the field, which I've referenced here. But here's a snapshot. Right? The first atomic commercial clock product was introduced. It's a cesium product by the national company. It's called the Atomicron. That was in 1956. Rubidium products followed shortly thereafter in 1962 by Varian. And today's sort of baseline high-performance atomic clock, the microchip 5071A cesium beam tube, was initially developed by HP, introduced in 1964. There have been several innovations and improvements, but the basic architecture was introduced commercially in 1991. The product has not changed much since then. That's not the case in rubidium standards. There's been a lot more diversity in rubidium products, and the field there is really split into 2 different halves. There's sort of lamp-pumped rubidium clocks and laser-based coherent population trapping clocks, which could be rubidium or cesium. What we'd like to be able to do is compare these clock products, not longitudinally, not over time, mostly because we don't really have great access to many of the old data sheets, but vertically. So I take a snapshot of the field at 2020 and look at how different products compare to each other. And so we set out to be able to do that. What we tried to do when we started looking at this a couple years ago was to come up with sort of this global quality factor for clocks, this goodness parameter. What we wanted to do was plot a single metric related to the clock quality as a function of a single resource metric. And we got stuck because there's not a great way of doing that. Different applications require different quality parameters. You know, some favor short-term stability or long-term. Some favor time error, accumulated time error, or environmental susceptibility, low susceptibility. There are many different kinds of quality factors. There's also not a single well-known resource metric. Some applications require low size. For some, power is most important. For some, cost is the most important thing. There's not a great way of doing this simple apples-apples comparison. But it's our job. That's what we have to be able to do as a community to make these comparisons and to track our progress. So we're going to try to do it, even though it's imperfect, the solution that we've arrived at. The problems that we came up with, there's no single the cost function, there's no single performance metric. Even if we had this, what time interval to use? Am I looking at the stability after a second, a day, a week, a month? Different applications require different time intervals. What environmental profile to use? It's not, it's definitely not fair to look at a clock at room temperature if you want to put it in the field. It's also not quite fair to evaluate it over from minus 40 to plus 80, some enormous temperature range, because many applications don't span that either. So we're going to try to do this even though we know it's an approximation. Thankfully, there's a well-established equation for computing the time error for different clocks. This is well known in the community. It involves a deterministic part. We're looking at the time error as a function of holdover time tau. We'd like to look at that after a day. The deterministic part just looks at the initial time error, the initial frequency error. There's some known deterministic drift shown with this capital A. There's some environmental part due to the integrated effects of the environment. And there's this plus or minus this random or stochastic part associated with the clock instability. And so great, okay, we have an equation. Let's try to use this, right? This is the equation that we wanted to be able to use. And when we tried to do that, we ran into a couple of problems. So I'll just highlight an example of how we did that for one particular clock. Out of any, we just picked the microchip CSAC. We went to the data sheet. We saw a single number for deterministic drift. We saw an Allen deviation number related to the clock instability. We didn't find it at a day, but we have it at 1,000 seconds, so we can extrapolate. We saw a temperature sensitivity, over this enormous temperature range, -10 to +70. You're like, all right, well, it's not quite fair to linearize that, but taking such an enormous thing would be really a worst case. So what we chose to do, this was an analysis decision, is just to use this very simplified equation, which ignores the initial sink and just has deterministic drift, and it adds the 1 sigma value associated with the Allen deviation to factor in the stability. A number of assumptions. You can read our IEEE review article if you want to go through all the details. I won't focus on the details. I'd like to focus on the result. And so we did this for a number of clocks in the market. And I'll spend a little bit more time talking about the results. So first, we computed an enormous clock database. These aren't all the atomic clocks on the market, but we made an attempt to include at least one from every major manufacturer in the world and at least one of each category. We've also color-coded them by type of physics package. CPT is a laser-based coherent population trapping clock. Rubidium means a lamp-based rubidium clock. Cesium is a cesium beam tube. There's 2 cold atom clocks. There's a single passive hydrogen maser and 3 active hydrogen masers. We now plot the time error after a day based on the previous equation as a function of size. It's a log-log plot. The legend is shown here. Again, emphasizing TempCo and environment is not included here. That would only make things worse. When we did that, we saw something really fascinating, which is that every single clock on the market fell on this linear trend line, that's power law on a log-log plot, to within an order of magnitude. This is way more than we knew there would obviously be a trend. We didn't think it would be this predictable. A few ramifications that come out of this. So first, we don't really care about the individual clocks anymore, and it's kind of cluttered to have all these numbers here. So we're just going to take off the legend for the rest of the talk. You got one last second to find your favorite clock and try to remember where it is on the plot. But we're going to take off those legends going forward. What I also want to plot, and this is starting to get a little bit US-centric, when that's okay, is 5 different US government clock development goals over the past 20 years. These are not included in the trendline fit, but I want to put them as black stars, as goals, not as demonstrations, just to see the difference between US government clock development goals and what we have now in commodity electronics products. We can also plot it versus weight. There's not much to say there. Size and weight are very correlated in electronics products. And, we see the same trend line. I don't have shown the exact equation here that's in the IEEE paper. The exact equation doesn't really matter. What we think is fascinating is that there's such a predictable and persistent scaling. We're not saying that it's a fundamental physics here. There's not any fundamental physics that we've done. We've just done a phenomenological, empirical observation of what's on the market today. We'll come back to some conclusions from that. So the next one we did was look at clock performance versus power, where we see a different type of scaling. There's no longer a power law fit here, and you see this sort of curving or nonlinear on a log-log plot scale. So there's some kind of thresholding or saturation effect that's going on here. Empirically, we can see we need to invest a few watts, something like on the order of 5 or 6 watts, before we start reaping some benefits. Benefits means less time error. Better is down on this plot. That may just be related to the fact that we need to have some threshold amount of power to run the microprocessors and controllers and everything we need in atomic clock products. There's, interestingly, a little bit of a gap here in the region of like 1 to 5-ish watts for clock products, which might be something that would be useful to explore. Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit about what this means. Some of the themes that we've got from the trend lines and from our discussions with folks in the community. And the first one is is both obvious, but I think it's also very interesting. It's commercial atomic clock products exhibit a predictable performance scaling. And that's obvious, right? Any product is going to scale with resources, whether it's cars or photovoltaics or atomic clocks. We're surprised at how persistent it is across 5 or 6 orders of magnitude or size or weight or power. And we're surprised it's so persistent independent of what technology we're using. From very, very ancient rubidium and cesium clocks to very modern physics-based, laser-based CPT clocks, cold atom clocks. This is what surprised us. And led us to our second conclusion here is, it doesn't matter what's in the box. So at some point you have a black box, you plug it into the wall, you have some atomic resonance on the inside, and you have stable 10 megahertz coming out. On the inside, in our trend lines, we've included passive atomic frequency standards, active atomic frequency standards, rubidium, cesium, hydrogen standards, lamp pumped, laser-based. Atomic clocks that use very cold atoms, cooled down to temperatures very close to absolute zero. Atomic clocks based on room temperature or heated atomic beams. It doesn't matter. In fact, there's a very, very clear seamless transition between these laser-based and these lamp-pumped rubidium clocks shown at this inset. So if this happens, it's not really about what physics package architecture is best to pick for future clocks. Really that at some different size point or some different power point, there is an optimal physics package for that power point, but there's not a single one that's sort of like the global best. We see empirically that investment of a few watts is required to get this thresholding behavior. And we also notice, in terms of the innovation in the past 20 years, that innovation is really at the edge. We're seeing a lot of movement and new products in the low performance, or low power end CSAC, as well as some of the higher performance, some of the cold atom clocks, without much change in the middle. It would be interesting to pursue this beyond the extremes that we have today. Even lower powers and potentially even higher performance for optical clocks. So those are the themes that we see from the trend lines, and we can come back and talk to that a little bit more later on. I'm going to shift gears and talk not about the output of the industry, but about the input, like what's coming into the industry in terms of US government investment. And now we're going to get a little bit more US-centric as we talk about financial investments from the US government, but I believe this scales globally. So what we attempted to do was come up with a list of all the atomic clock development programs from the US government over the past 20 years. It's definitely incomplete, right? Because it's easier to miss something than over-include. But we tried to make a good faith effort to get the right number of zeros for all the big clock development programs. You've heard of some of them, things like CSAC, right? Several other DARPA programs are included. We arrived at this list in a number of different ways. Some are publicly available information. The DARPA budgets, for example, are well known. You can Google them. Some are available from discussions with colleagues. Some I just estimated, right? So there's different quality of information that went into this list, but we're trying to get the right number of zeros to add up the dollars that went into this industry in terms of funding. And that number we estimate to be around $400 million over the past 20 years. So it's worth asking, what are we getting out of that? And we'll try to come at some kind of analysis of that value, right? So the US government, in our view, has been investing heavily in atomic clocks since 2000. Started really in earnest with the DARPA CSAC program that started in 2002 and ran in sort of different forms till 2014. This resulted in the introduction of a commercial product in 2011. That's amazing. Less than a decade after the release of a DARPA BAA, Symmetricom released a product. shipping from a factory. It's a huge success story. Since then, a second source, Teledyne, has introduced a similar product. And I would say there's many different indirect outcomes of the CSAC product, including the Mac product and really many other CPT-based products on the market. Now, since then, there have been a slew of other clock R&D development programs in the US. Impact, ACES, STOIC, various small business innovation research programs, funding by others, but there's really been no volume commercial or DoD product that's resulted from this R&D activity. And that's actually what got us thinking about this sort of return on investment analysis. With an asterisk, I do want to point out a newcomer alert. Spectrodynamics, a small company in Colorado, does have a portable cold atom rubidium microwave clock. Franklin's here. Say hi to Franklin. Please go talk to him. It's a really cool product. I encourage you to go learn more about this at the exhibit hall. It's a little, from our perspective, it's a little bit of a stretch to call it a volume product right now. There just haven't been enough of them that have really been tested. So one big thing came out of this with some similarities, and then maybe one asterisk, one other maybe. Right? So the question is, are we getting our money's worth? So let's look at the value generated from this. So here's my poor PowerPoint description of all the R&D that happens in the world in atomic clocks. Right? This is what it looks like. It's a box, right? There's universities, national labs, FFRDCs, companies. Many folks are working either in atomic clocks or in components related to clocks that's part of this. And I'm kind of mixing US and global here, but we'll focus on the US. What's getting pumped into that to keep that alive? US government investment at the tune of around, let's call it 20 million a year. Let's just linearize it. Okay, 400 million bucks over 20 years. Industry is also investing. Industry has an R&D budget. It's small. I have no idea what it is, and they probably won't tell us anyways. But industry is pumping some money into that. All right? These are the inputs into the box. Shown on the bottom are not financial inputs, but they're drivers, they're pushers, right? There's known DoD needs. Like if DoD releases a BAA that says, we want you to do this, industry is going to work towards a product that does that. There's from our view, there's a couple of really strong drivers right now. There's low-cost CSAC. People want a CSAC that costs small hundreds of dollars. There's future high-performance space clocks, future space capabilities, and many others. But these are the things that we see as sort of known drivers. There's some unexpected ones, which are interesting. And I'll share a microchip story. If you talk to the folks at Microchip, Peter Cash is here. I encourage you to talk to them about this at the exhibit. They'll tell you that the market for CSAC now, the biggest driver in the market is the oil and gas industry. It has been since the beginning, and it still is. And that was unexpected. No one from the government team or Symmetricom, Microchip, expected that at the beginning. But because of that, the oil and gas industry kept the factory alive, kept people employed, kept engineers building and designing circuits, kept scientists employed, so that over the course of 5 to 10 years, we now have a better CSAC that could potentially become a more high-volume DoD product. And this is a relationship we think is worth exploring in more detail, that kind of synergy between government and industry needs that may be being sort of underutilized at the moment. I don't know what the others are because they're not expected. So we can look at what's coming out of this. This is my box of R&D. Money coming in, needs coming in, what's coming out? We tried to estimate the size of the global atomic clock market. We did that by talking to a number of folks in the industry, trying to read industry reports. There's not a great way of doing that because we don't have global numbers. We heard numbers anywhere from as low as 100 million to as high as at 450 million, this is US dollars in revenue per year. you could just take the midpoint or something like that. If the US market's a half-ish and DoD is a half-ish of that, I'm trying to get the right number of zeros here, DoD purchases tens of millions of dollars of clocks per year. That would be equivalent to a couple GPS clocks. And so if you just look at the numbers in a very crude way like that, you might say, oh, something's kind of weird here. So we're putting $20 million a year, but DoD is only using 10-ish million a year. Are those in the right balance? That was the question we set out to ask. And as we got further in that, we realized that that's not really a great question to try to answer, because there are many other benefits that come out of this that are not captured in clock revenue. Right? Clocks are typically used as components in larger systems. We know the global market for GPS is north of $1 trillion since it was developed. This is a system that's enabled by atomic clocks. Future capabilities, especially war-fighting capabilities, if we could end a war a week early with clock capabilities, that's something that's difficult to put a financial value on. Workforce and component development of all the folks in the government who are using clocks in larger systems or PNT in larger systems is also something that's extremely valuable. So I'll just say MITRE is beginning to start to work on this economic analysis of the overall economic impact of atomic clocks in society and trying to help scale the appropriate value of investment. That's something we just started. I don't have anything to report on that today, but we'll be able to share that as time goes on. So I think I'm going too fast here, but we have a few slides now on the path forward for the clock industry as a whole, looking at government as well as industry for recommendations on how to make clocks better. The first one is, and really the most important, one of the themes of the talk, is it's important for us, when I say us, the whole community, to develop realistic goals. If we look at the entire state of the field in 2022 right now and see that it follows this persistent and predictable trend line, and then we come out with some requirement or some goal for some future system, not a custom one-off thing, but a volume shipping thing that's, this pink star is way, way off the trend line. It's kind of like going from couch potato to a gold medal in a couple of years. It's not very realistic, and it's not super helpful for the field. We don't think this trend line is static. All right? It's not fundamental physics. That line is not going to be there in 50 years. What we predict, and I'll be happy to come back in 10 years to give a 10-year update on the trend line, is as physics packages, as laser technologies, as ASICs get better and better, individual clocks will start creeping down below the trend line, slowly over time, and at all size scales, at all power scales. And slowly what will happen over the decades-long time scales is that the entire trend line will slowly start to come down and down and down. It may change slope. Slope doesn't really matter over the course of time. We view that future as much more realistic than a single company issuing this sort of leapfrog technology that's going to jump over everybody else and issue a volume shipping commercial product next time like that. That's a prediction, and we'll be happy to come back and look at the validity of that with a little bit more time. In order to get there, we have some specific recommendations for improving industrial atomic clocks by, say, 2050. 4 specific ones. First, adequately incorporate commercial interest in government development programs. This is what we learned very strongly in the case of CSAC. There's a tendency for anyone to just think about what they want, right? And we're seeing specific needs from DoD coming out, like low-cost CSAC, future high-performance space clocks for GNSS and other applications. There's some really interesting potential markets in the commercial sector, and not necessarily markets for clocks, but sort of market levers and pushers. We even heard about one this morning. I mentioned the quantum computing market. So there's multiple US-based companies in quantum computing with a market capitalization higher than the global atomic clock market. Okay? Now, quantum computing is a bubble. It's overinflated right now, so that's an overly high market capitalization, but that's huge. Those multiple companies happen to be pursuing a quantum computing architecture that's based on trapped ytterbium ions, which is not the same thing as a trapped ytterbium ion clock, but it's pretty darn close. And so for us, global us, the entire clock community, not to be leveraging potential investment or asset or a lever of the quantum computing market might be leaving something on the table. So for those of you interested more in quantum, I really recommend attend Richard Overstreet's tutorial tomorrow. He's going to talk from Microchip. He's going to talk a little bit about that clock architecture and how it relates to quantum. So I put a plug in. I hope you can attend that tomorrow. I'm so glad Alex talked about autonomous vehicles, AI, and self-driving cars today. Not all of those things will require an atomic clock on them. Remember, time transfer is good, but many will. And to the extent that the low-cost clocks that we need from DoD may also be relevant for future sensor systems in the commercial industry is potentially also underexploited. Oil and gas, and many others. That's one recommendation. Number two, it's important to fund the practical R&D necessary to develop these capabilities. There's a big gap here that's not being addressed. So academics are interested in fundamental physics, and gravitational redshift, and publishing in high-profile journals. They're looking at high-performance optical clocks. They're looking seriously at post-optical clocks, nuclear clock transitions. Industry cares about, let's make something better by factor of 2. Whether it's Tempco or Power or Retrace or something. And there's this big, big gap here in the middle where the research isn't quite interesting enough for junior faculty to look at it, and industry doesn't have the resources. This is fundamentals associated with rubidium and ytterbium lamp physics, fundamental ion trapping problems, developing of photonics and UV lasers, miniature components. This is a small community, often funded by small business innovation research grants or FFRDCs, and more investment here will help the entire quantum industry in terms of moving forward. Number three, we need to think holistically about the entire quantum ecosystem, right? So right now, we mostly have PhD physicists working on these problems. There's a big gap at the associate's, bachelor's, and master's level for folks who want to be able to work in this technology. And there's something really interesting happening in university right now. We're starting to see new departments or minors or even just academic concentrations pop up. They have different names. They might be called quantum science or quantum engineering or atomic engineering, quantum computing, quantum information. The field doesn't have a name yet because they're being developed. But it's important to start developing folks in the engineering college rather than the College of Liberal Arts who are getting less than a PhD to be able to work in this area. In addition to people, we need factories to build stuff, particularly in the US when we talked about building sensitive subcomponents. There's a wonderful analogy to AIM Photonics, which is a recent public-private partnership developing lasers and photonics-based components, primarily in silicon photonics, that could be exploited to develop different material systems outside of silicon that we need for the integrated photonics, MEMS, ASICs, and other things that we need for these future quantum components. Number four, this connects back to my estimate of how to do those clock comparison charts that we talked about at the very beginning of this presentation. In order to track anything, we need a good way to measure our progress. So here's a problem that we see. Pick an atomic clock. I just made fun of two of them, SpectraTime and Microchip. These are rubidium clocks. You have 4 pages of information. It's okay. Tells you a little bit about what happens. There's a single number for linear drift, just a single number, as if everything follows that. A TEMPCO is given over an enormous temperature range. It's not clear how linear that relationship is. A standard way of measuring retrace is not given. A lot of information is missing. Now go to a single op-amp. Analog Devices OP27, famous op-amp. 20 pages of information. Okay? 6 beautiful pages of graphs of how an op-amp performs over voltage noise, or current noise, or temperature variations, or shock and vibe. Anything you want to know about this op-amp is here. In an earlier draft, I actually had slides of the op-amp charts because it was so much information. But we can't do that for atomic clocks, I think just because no one's asking for it. What we really need, and would be a huge contribution to the community, is a better and consistent method of time error prediction. What we did, and all the approximations that we listed in the IEEE review article, is an estimate. Like we're taking a deterministic number and then just adding a stochastic instead of plus or minus. There's many other approximations that make this a poor way to do it. It would be wonderful if there was a common format, detailed data sheet that would enable us to be able to predict time error, compare vendors, and predict clock behavior in the field. This could be done, for example, with an IEEE standard, such as a future iteration of IEEE 1193 or some other standard. We need something like nutrition facts for atomic clocks that tells you the basics of what you have. We want a radar engineer or a comms engineer to be able to look at a data sheet and say, okay, so if I discipline this thing to GPS for 3 hours, then I let it run, and then I change the temperature by 14 degrees and let it go for another week, what's the time error? There's not a great way of doing that right now because one reason because there's not a linear TEMPCO and other information is missing. Leaving a lot of time for questions here, which is great. I'll conclude with my final thoughts and opinions on the topics we've been talking about. Number 1, we're not doubters. Clocks will get better. Human ingenuity is a real thing. That trend line is not static. It will continue to get better. But hoping for the impossible, or really, kind of predicting that this is going to happen with your product next year in volume is just as hard as it sounds. Instead, we see a lot more value by doing all the things as a community that we need to do to be able to move this whole trend line down. First, in order to know that we're getting better, we need a good way of measuring that progress. Second, we need people and widgets to do the progress. So developing the whole quantum ecosystem with staff, education, workforce development, foundry, and component development. Developing realistic goals, especially government goals, that adequately look at, incorporate, or leverage commercial interest, not from an altruistic point of view, but to keep the factory alive so that there will be future DoD capabilities, will also enable us to be able to make these improvements, which will enable a wide range of applications, some of which we don't even know right now. So I think I'm good on time here. I want to conclude by I've interacted with and appreciated discussions with a huge number of MITRE colleagues on this. The list is too long to name, so thank you to everyone, internal colleagues. And I've also spoken with a number of external colleagues to debate and discuss and get some of the material for this presentation. Many of you may be joining on Zoom or in the audience. Thank you very much. For those in the virtual audience, I do want to list my email address here. I'd be happy to take questions if you have any after the fact and engage in a dialogue. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
You mentioned the need for a better function, a better way to evaluate clocks. In your paper, did you play with the obvious things like just keeping the drift, or just keeping the tau term with a different tau? And did you get the same idea that they all lined up in a power law?
You mean not take the TDEV out and just have drift?
Yeah, play around with that.
We did play around. We
and
plotted.
Did it make a difference?
In fact, that's how we picked a day, because time error after a day is pretty similar to time error after a second or an hour. It kind of, the time interval doesn't really matter.
And
there's a very similar trend line.
Other question I had was, what specifically are the uses the oil and gas exploration industries use for clocks?
So the underground seismology market, what they do is they put a large number of CSACs near the ocean floor, and then they let out a big sonic boom. And then they time the pressure waves, the reactions, and based on the time of all those back reflections, they can determine if there's an underground cavity, which may be a good place to drill.
Hi, David. Thanks for the talk. I thought it was very interesting. Very relatable. Usually have a lot more trouble following clock talks, being from the navigation side. You mentioned something, it was in the passing, it said something about lamp physics, and I was just curious what that is, because you said you praised it as the next big thing, and I don't know what it is.
Oh, yeah, so rubidium lamp jumps, for example, I think Jim Camparo at Aerospace has done some work showing that that is one of the limiting factors in the high performance clocks that are used in GPS, which is the contributor to the clock error, although that term is small in GPS. There's some instability associated with the frequency and intensity of light coming out of lamps, which is not even fully understood now. It's still a topic of research.
I have a question on your, you don't have to show it, but you showed at certain moment the CSAC at $200 cost estimate of the, I imagine this is the gross estimate of fabrication for the cost, right?
That's a goal.
That's a goal,
That's what people want.
So I was wondering, what drives this goal? Because looking at the market today, from year to year, prices are going up, right? So margins are going up too. But then we got this goal of producing CSACs at lower cost. Which is the market behind driving this goal?
So we want to be able to put small CSACs that are cheap in portable situations such as GPS receivers. And in order to do that, to put them with a lot of people, they need to be cheap.
But what is the application behind that? Okay, GPS receivers, they exist everywhere. Is it a specific application? Is it autonomous driving? What is it, the application behind it? Because atomic clocks, miniaturized atomic clocks as we know them today, like Max or CSACs, they got a huge range of access to all those verticals already. But is it a specific vertical that is driving this reduction of the cost on CSAC?
I don't know if it's a specific thing other than it would enable holdover for longer times if there was an atomic clock, a cheap CSAC, rather than a quartz oscillator in these kind of handheld systems. That's a general answer, but that applies to a number of different mission scenarios. Sure.
Just one last question.
So, hi, I'm Marcos Pangro from KTH, Royal Institute of Technology. I had a question regarding what you said regarding time transfer and these cheap CSACs. There is a possibility that we will not reach the $200 target, right? So, in this condition, where will be the benefit in improving the time transfer? Because for some applications, instead of having distributed CSACs everywhere, we might have one very precise one in one location and improve our time transferability over other methods of PNT, not necessarily GPS or other communication infrastructure. What do you think about this direction instead?
I think that's very compelling, and to the extent that time transfer is good, we don't need clocks. And this is really one of the themes of the field. Time transfer is good, and that results in a small number of companies that care about this. In the future, I see, the innovations in time transfer will continue to happen at the same rate as atomic clocks. We tried to sort of compare those, or is the rate of those, how are those progressing? And they're just really sort of different units and different metrics. So we didn't have a great way of comparing the rate of change in those two industries. But I'd love to learn more there. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this concludes our keynote, and now we're going to move to the exhibitor presentations.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Coleman. I'm a PTTI committee. I'm a pseudo chair this year. But after that really nice talk from David on different types of products, it was actually perfectly scheduled because now we're going to hear about products from some of the exhibitors that are out on the floor. And they're each going to come up one after another and just give you a little bit of an introduction to some of the things that you can see out there today. We really hope you spend some good time talking with each of them. Okay, so we're going to start with Brandywine. We're going in forward alphabetical order this year. So Alonia will begin.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. It's so great to see all of you in person this year. Okay. My name is Alana Diashenko. I'm with Brandywine Communications. We're a local company located in Southern California, in Tustin and McFadden, where we manufacture the products. We manufacture time and frequency master clocks, specifically mostly concentrating on aerospace and defense. We kind of go from small embedded board level products to small products disciplining oscillators to a larger redundant systems, rugged redundant systems that use military GPS and GNSS clocks as well. We do also manufacture our own high stability quartz oscillators, but also in the industry work with different partners for rubidium and CSAC oscillators as well. Please come stop by our booth. This year we're demonstrating a small rugged airborne module that is hosting the military GPS receiver and outputs multiple network capability ports, as well as JASA compliant low phase noise 10 megahertz output. It uses vibration isolated oscillator in conjunction with CSAC. We also came out with the 3U VPX SOSA compliant board that we are continuing to work on, but all of that is in our booth. Please come, stop by and see us. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My company, Gytech, has been in business since 1988, designing and manufacturing frequency counters and time interval analyzers. The greatest thing that we pride ourselves on is the sub-picosecond resolution that we provide over many channels that are all synchronized to the same master clock, so you can actually test them against that one master clock and against each other. We have some very happy customers in the crowd, some of which is like Demetrius here, that can attest to that. This is some of the product lines that we have. We sell systems as well as cards, instruments that you can plug into your PC, download the drivers, and have it on your PC computer. We also have a portable unit that you can take to the field. This year we've introduced the new chassis of the GT9000, which are the new and improved chassis. You can see this one with a touchscreen display, and this one is a rack mount that you can actually scale up to 24 channels again. I urge you to come and stop by, say hello, see what we are doing, and you know, even if you don't buy today or tomorrow, just know what is out there. So when you need it, you call us. Thank you, guys.
Good morning. My name is Gregor Sy Jackson from Jackson Labs Technologies. We're located in Nevada.
Can you speak into the mic?
Oh, sorry. We're located in Nevada and manufacture in California and Nevada and overseas as well. We're showing three kind of new products this year. And one of them is based on a Microsemi SA55 rubidium, which is an upgrade to our legacy low noise rubidium clock, giving better hold over sub 200 nanoseconds per day, guaranteed a warm-up time, and an expanded temperature range. And we're able to ship this besides the extreme supply chain woes that I'm sure everybody has been exposed to. Even if you just try to buy a car or something, you have 8 months lead time nowadays. We're shipping these on a daily basis. So moving on from there, we've introduced our PNT 6XXX chassis, which is an assured position navigation and timing unit. We do most of what we do in the timing domain, and positioning and navigation is something that falls out of that, which is kind of different. Any kind of GPS receiver that you buy, unless it's dedicated, focuses obviously on position and navigation, and timing is an afterthought. We kind of go about it the other way around. It's a half 19-inch rack mountable unit. You can put two of them next to each other. It has a IEEE 1588 Grandmaster and Slave built in, double oven, rubidium, chip-scale atomic clock, or even a TCXO for very low-cost, high-volume applications. And it has as a bonus a Satellus low Earth orbit receiver front end that we're showing at the booth as well, which is kind of a very unique path paving new product that allows you to get assured position, navigation, timing, latitude, longitude, and height from a low Earth orbit constellation rather than a GNSS constellation. So it's the first commercial product out there that does that. And allows you to also go into some non-military applications. Last but not least, it has a built-in transcoder, which is an RF output distribution device that allows you to retrofit any kind of existing product that has a GPS receiver in it with this box, and you immediately have added all of these capabilities by just essentially replacing the GPS receiver antenna, making upgrades really easy. Here's a photo of our latest generation, second generation low Earth orbit receiver. It's 1.4 by 1.5 inches by less than half an inch high and consumes about 0.6 watts. It's comparable to a second or third generation GPS receiver, except this thing is much better than a second generation GPS receiver. We've had time to first fix of as low as 36 seconds out of this unit. And it is designed specifically for timing and frequency, with positioning and navigation as an added feature. Obviously, if you have very good time and frequency, you can do very good positioning as well. Come on by the booth. Haven't seen many of you. This year is kind of slow, so thank you very much for coming in personally. And that concludes my presentation.
Hello, I'm John Clark from Master Clock Incorporated. We are keeping the world in sync out of St. Charles, Missouri. That's suburban St. Louis. We were founded in 1994, actually by my parents in our home garage, and from there we grew into who we are today. We've got our headquarters there in St. Charles, as well as a development office out in Sunnyvale, California, just up north. Global distribution and support. We've won awards for our exports as well as some of our innovations, and so we're happy to hopefully continue the trend. What we're known for is we have our own in-house manufacturing and development. People can bring us problems. We can iterate them through very small quantities until we get to the final product and then build from there, working in concert with them on everything from hardware, firmware, software, and all the other add-ons. Custom integration application specialists, we find a lot of people that talk about what's cool, what's new, what's late and great, but back in their lab they've got 35-year-old equipment with legacy protocols, and we specialize in integrating those in and providing kind of a full path forward for the whole system. And then of course consulting, support, and optimization services. How do I do this? Why is my client behaving this way? How do I benchmark, how my system's operating? We take a combination of our manufacturing know-how as well as just experiences in the field over all these years to bring good solutions. And we like to save time, so that's my presentation.
Hi everyone, I'm Stuart Hampton. I'm with Microchip. It's great to see everybody here in person in beautiful Long Beach, California. And some of you may be fairly new to the industry, so just to let you know, Microchip Frequency and Time Systems is really the long list of companies you see there now wrapped up under the Microchip umbrella. So some of those names are very familiar. And we have been in the PNT business for 40 years working on things like atomic clock and high performance oscillators and systems. And really we're made up of 3 broad product areas. One is the synchronization products. Most of those are developed here in California, in San Jose. The clocks products, which I represent, is based mostly out of Massachusetts and Beverly, with some in Alabama for our Maser development. And our government systems is primarily out of Boulder, as well as some out of Beverly, where we build high-performance militarized atomic clocks and other type of systems for the government and for defense in the realm of PNT. So we got a couple of a couple of demos at the booth. We will show you some of the atomic oscillators that David talked about, those low swap atomic oscillators. We have those on display, and we can show you how they work. We also have a phase measurement system there, which is a great way to measure those atomic clocks. And that's a great product that we offer. And then we've also got some capabilities called Blue Sky, which is a way to quickly and effectively and cost-effectively protect your infrastructure from jamming and spoofing of the GNSS signal. So please do come by and see us. Thanks very much.
That was number 8. So I'm Stavros from Orolia, Switzerland, and I'm going to present you our newest product. Just in parenthesis, Orolia is one of the largest manufacturers of space atomic clocks. Recently we acquired the Galileo 2nd generation contract for rubidium standards as well as hydrogen maser physics package. And now we're launching in the next couple of weeks to come the new ruggedized MRO50. The previous version, MRO50, was the standard version with standard temperature ranges as well as vibration profile. And with this new product, we're aiming various range of applications, mainly in the ADG, the government defense and administration market, as well as in the low Earth orbit applications. The new MRO50, as its predecessor, has the lowest power consumption in the miniature atomic clock category. That's the MAC, not compared to the CSAC, of course. It's based on the double resonance technology compared to the CPT, and to our opinion brings a certain range of advantages. And in now its newest version expands -40 to 80 degrees, and the power consumption comes with 2 versions, either 450 milliwatts or 330 milliwatts. So you can either visit us at booth 11 or come in Switzerland to find on your own more about it.
Hi, my name is Nino De Fonsis. Yeah. And so the big threat today is there is the high level of threats out there. And there is a new mandate that you probably know is called PNT, Position, Navigation, Timing. And critical infrastructure are at stake, because if timing goes down, if GPS goes down, everything goes down. So The segment or the sectors that are affected are smart grids, transportation, defense, communication, finance. Osioquas, as a 70-year-old company, is leading the PNT resiliency and assurance market with some new technology that we're announcing here at PTTI. So we have an innovative portfolio. The difference between assurance and resilience: assurance is something that works as a survivable capability, whereas resilient is something that works for a recoverable capability. So it's more about short-term versus long-term if you're looking for a mission or if you're looking for a project. So as you can see, we have a family of products. Starting from the left, we have Access Sync. Those are very small Grandmaster, fully integrated. They provide GPS, they provide a PTP holdover, and then we go up to the Edge Sync, which is a bigger capability. We serve more clients. Like on the Access, we can serve 64 clients. On the Edge Sync, we can go to about 120. If you go to the right, they're becoming bigger. We have capability, we have redundancy, and we can serve up to 2,000 plus clients. And finally, we have a line of optical cesium as well as legacy magnetic cesium. And of course, if we combine a cesium with a Grandmaster, you have what we call the GPS backup capability if GPS goes down, thanks to the cesium capability. Finally, we have also a new line of OSA inside. Those are modules for equipment vendors. And at the bottom, you can see the market we're serving. Finally, we have also a software management system, which basically provides the fault-tolerant mitigation capability. So that is the assurance. It is supposed to work when it fails at any degree. That's the capability that we're bringing to the market. If you want to discuss your requirements, come to our booth, and we will further discuss your requirement. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Staffan Johansson from Pendulum Instruments. We are a European-based company with our roots in former Philips Test and Measurement. We were a division for time and frequency competence in Stockholm, Sweden, starting in 1960s. We have 60 years experience. Now we are an independent company, spin-off from Philips in 1998. Global company selling all over the world. In the US, we have been pretty successful by serving the US Air Force, Army, and Navy since 30 years back. Our product range is time and frequency reference, counter analyzers, frequency distribution. And then we have two new product lines acquired last year, which really don't have anything to do with time and frequency, but it's just to broaden our portfolio. We acquired two Swedish companies called FLC Electronics, making high voltage linear amplifiers, and a company called Detectus, making EMC scanners for pre-compliance testing. Our main product lines are time and frequency references, with the niches of being traceable via built-in calibrator in one line of references, and portable via an optional battery pack in another line of references. Frequency distribution systems, short range over coax, long range over fiber. And last but not least, we have the time and frequency counter analyzers, where we offer the CNT90 family, 50 picoseconds resolution, 250 measurements, K measurements per second, and gap-free measurements. We also have a microwave counter series going up to 60 gigahertz. There is a soon coming product which is a multi-channel frequency analyzer with 4 parallel inputs, where you can measure frequency in 4 parallel inputs at a time, simultaneously display them graphically or numerically with 7 picoseconds resolution and 20 megasamples per second. Optionally, there is an RF input to 24 gigahertz. And these are the 4 presentation modes you have with this counter. Come visit us in booth number 1 if you want to know more. And thank you for your attention.
So good morning. It's great to see everybody after 2 years. I know it's a small crowd, but I want to say I'm very happy to see everybody. And I want to give special thanks to Michael for taking our presentation at the last minute. We weren't sure whether this was actually going to happen. And our plans were undecided until the last minute. But we're glad to be here. My name's Franklin Askeruns, representing Spectra Dynamics. We're a small company located in Louisville, Colorado. We make instrumentation for time and frequency applications. That includes distribution for pulses, for timing, frequency distribution. We make microsteppers for timescales or for special synchronization applications. We have a variety of synthesizers, from RF synthesizers to microwave synthesizers. We make specialty synthesizers for a variety of applications. For people that are working on optical clocks or frequency combs or high frequency, high stability microwave generation, optoelectronic microwave generation. We have started making optical pulsed RF dividers, if you will, that preserve the stability from the optical signals down and translate down that 100 megahertz, 10 megahertz in a pulse per second. Our new product is the cold rubidium atomic clock. That came out of a DARPA project where Robert Lutwak was our program manager. And he decided to invest in us, and so I'm very grateful because we are a very small company. And we're very proud that we have started shipping the product this last year, and there's a few of them in the field. Please stop by our booth, number 20, and we have a small demo. It's not the real thing because they're too expensive at the moment to risk bringing to the conference, but maybe in the future we will. So it's a small product. As far as a cold down clock goes, it's a 40-liter box about the size of a desktop computer, and it features no appreciable drift over the long term, so it's a little bit different than Mazers. And the performance is about 10 times better than 5071. So please stop by. I can talk to you a little bit more if you want to know how it works. I can provide a simple explanation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeff Martin with Spirent. I realize I'm the last presenter here before lunch, so I will be brief. Appreciate you sticking around. This is why we're here, to be in front of you. Spirent has been around since about 1985. Our early days were interesting. We had a group of clever engineers in the early 80s who were running up and down from the roof twice a day so they could see signals, GPS signals. That clever group got tired of running up and down, especially in the middle of the night, so from that group came what today are the Spirent simulators. We've got a range of products to suit various applications. I'll let you read the bullet points here. We do serve and work with our customers from industry, from government, from all walks of PNT. We do have a couple new things on the booth this year. We're a small group, so take a minute to pop on in there. I realize the food's not in the conference hall this year, but we'll be there. And we've done a fair amount this past year with alternative RF navigation. Some folks are doing some interesting things in the LEO space, so we've been addressing that and teaming with some folks. As well as portable simulation. We've got a portable simulator that's found its way onto a few platforms, moving platforms, some airframes, and some land vehicles. So it's been an interesting last couple years. I think we'll be in bigger numbers next year, but it's been good nonetheless. So come see us, and thanks for your time.
So this concludes the plenary, and I wish you a good conference, good rest of the conference. Thanks.